some developers or publishers decide to have like people who are caught cheating, they put them in the same lobby, and it kind of turns out for an amusing game, amusing session. And you're cheating. You just I guess you got to make sure you have the best cheats. But also, ironically, in a sense, I would say those who do cheat on a game tend to also be a bit more loyal to it.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Game, the podcast where we talk to experts in the gaming industry, sponsored by Yoda One. I'm Sandy, and I'm with my wonderful co-host Isma. Today, we are talking to Jaume Molins, who is helping devs improve the online multiplayer experience at i3dnet. Jaume, welcome. So I would love to know how you got into the industry. I always think it's interesting learning about how these people from all over the world found their love for gaming and in this industry.
I've been playing games for as long as I can remember. And, I searched more specifically commercial opportunities, and I ran into this company called i3d.net, which is where I'm working now. And I have been here for a year and 7 months, 8 months. And essentially doing business developments, traveling to conferences, which is how I met Ismael.
How do you see it from a multiplayer perspective going to these type of events, like especially in Europe, Reboot, Nordic, and all that? Like, what's the type of leads that you're looking for? Because there's a lot of indies, but at the same time, a lot of executives. So, what's the sweet spot for you?
The sweet spot for us ideally would be if there were, and I think we are looking into the possibility of either hosting or helping host or attending multiplayer specific conferences. But for the most part, it's the really big ones where it's studios of all sizes, so indies, double A's, and triple A's, mostly focused on PC and console. Because although we do serve mobile as well, PC and console is the ones that generally need the most, the bigger hardware, so to speak. And so it's a lot. It takes a lot more compute power to host a PC console game than it does a mobile game. But yeah, we're very platform agnostic. So generally, most conferences will have a fair share of single player and multiplayer games.
And then if I'm thinking about the big companies, okay, they already know their shit and everything, they know how to do it, but how much of education comes with what you do, guys? Every time you find an indie studio or a smaller studio that are like, okay, we want to go multiplayer, we have no idea, like it's something that they need to prepare in advance or in a stage of development that they need to stop and say, okay, now is when we need it. Like, how goes the whole process? How would you educate me if I have no idea?
Well, the tips I have are most for deciding how to or where to host the online multiplayer games. So for a developer that is already thinking of creating or is already creating an online multiplayer game, I have a few questions that I think would be very important for these developers to ask themselves, kind of like pre-game planning, let's call it. And so number one is about estimating numbers. So what are you expecting, right? So this takes into consideration that you kind of already have a game built, and together with your publisher or the market research you've done is okay, how many players are we expecting to have at launch? It's a very important number to have, because that way, depending on which hosting strategy you use, whether it's a peer-to-peer solution, whether it's dedicated servers, whether it's cloud, or whether it's a hybrid solution between dedicated servers and cloud, it's always nice to know, because launch is one of the most important things for an online multiplayer game. And the average users usually at launch spike pretty heavily, but then they stabilize as the game keeps going. And so taking that into consideration, depending on which game you have, I think would be the best. This is an important question. What are we expecting depending on the game we have? And yeah, so this should help us plan out, okay, maybe we should have this many servers or this many relationships with this many people, or if we have a peer-to-peer connection, this sort of community engagement and whatnot. The next one I would say is planning for success or planning for failure, right? So if that number that we spoke about previously, the expected concurrent users, does hit. What if it gets more popular than that? What is our plan for success? And the contrary is, what is the plan for failure? You don't want to overcommit to any resources, whether it's dedicated servers or cloud commits, because in case the numbers aren't as big as you hoped, you don't want to be locked in into paying for something you're not necessarily making the most out of. And then the opposite, what if the game gets too popular and you don't have the necessary resources to fit all the players that want to play, and then that causes players to leave, go and play other games.
Right.
It's also finding a perfect mix. So there's always different sorts of solutions that you can look into. But essentially, yes, you're building a game, but you're also building a business, right? So given the allocated resources and money and budget that you have, does it make more sense to deploy in more regions, deploy servers in more regions, and have fewer players in those regions, but have them have the best latency connection possible, which would be the case for shooter games, competitive games, and games like those? Or do we want to have fewer regions and more players connecting to those regions, to those servers in those regions, which might make sense for games like turn-based games or whatnot, where connection or latency isn't necessarily the number one priority for the player to really have that enjoyable multiplayer experience. Last one is, well, which kind of solution is best? Hybrid hosting, cloud,
Right.
or peer-to-peer? Again, all depends on the game. And yeah, just always do as much research as you can, talk to as many providers as you can. Always be aware, careful of that vendor lock-in. Whoever it is, you try to be as tech agnostic as possible, because at the end of the day, again, back to the topic of committing, over under committing. You want to be in control um, of what happens in the end. So I would say those are definitely a few things to think about for developers working on online multiplayer games.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, if I was a developer, I probably wouldn't have thought about multiple things you said in there, so that was probably really helpful to out there.
Absolutely, and this is again, and thank you for really having me, because the best we can do is just raise awareness, because we do really only become relevant at the end of the development pipeline, and so only then is when developers start asking themselves these questions. And it's no, it's something to ask yourself. Think of them at the beginning, especially the kind of like locking yourself to tech specific, from any company, and yeah, you don't want to find yourself using only services that work with one provider, because then if costs of hosting them become too high, then leaving them becomes almost impossible, or just the benefits don't outweigh the cons.
Yeah, it
Something
comes
about.
down to what we always say, right? And recommend to small studios, indie studios. This is a business at the end of the day. You need to make your numbers. You need to understand how many players you're gonna have when you release or after X time. You need to understand the impact of, okay, if the game is gonna go super well, how much I'm going to need, what's gonna be my next plan, how I'm going to address that good problem to have, right? Because many times we've
Right.
Right.
seen games that explode and then the servers fall right away and they take
And then
days.
people get so angry. I'm one of those
People
people.
get so angry. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, and they'll review bomb you. And
Yep.
I really, really look up to the guys at Arrowhead Studios, the developers of Helldivers 2, because they've had their issues, but they've really come back, and done it. So one of them was servers. I'm not exactly sure what the issue there was or how they got it solved, but I think by the next weekend there were almost no players with issues trying to find servers. And then most recently with them with people playing on PC having to connect to or create a PlayStation account. I really look up to them for how they tackled both of these challenges, and kind of really trying to keep their community happy, because they did get review bombed, and
Yeah.
that's just something you don't want. And they really took
No.
that and they spun it. And I've seen online pictures of kind of like a cape that they want to create with the fluctuation in reviews, which is it's a fantastic thing to do something that happens in the way they reacted. I think if or
Right.
yeah, when I have my own game studio is something I see as inspiration.
Because negative reviews can hurt your feelings. Like people need
Yeah,
that.
it
They
hurts feelings. It does. It does.
yeah.
It
You're
really
like,
does.
and then if you're just scrolling through them all, you're like, ouch, 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 ouch. Like it can be tough for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So now I want to get more into Jaume as someone in the industry that's been going around, not a lot of people, have seen a lot of games. What are the trends that you're seeing in general of the multiplayer? Like, for example, when all this battle royale is like exploded, did you see an uplift trend? Or what have been the moments in this past year that you've been working where you have seen a change in the trends of multiplayer? And which countries would you say that are the most popular or the pioneers on this space?
Honestly, I don't think I can really attribute one specific country. I see lots of great talent and a lot of developers from all over the world. And gaming being as international as it is, it's a product that you can ship into any country with relative ease. So really, there's developers, really great, talented people working on multiplayer projects all over the world. So speaking from my experience, there hasn't been one specific country or organization that really does has pioneered the online multiplayer space. What I do see a trend in, an increase in, is metaverse and extended reality and augmented reality, as maybe you have as well, Ismael and Sandy. It's definitely a growing trend. Some people see it as the future, and yeah, it's very interesting to see how different projects and companies are going about that. Some are just trying to create a space for friends to hang out. Others want to make it a campus with education, entertainment, and so on and so forth. It's yeah, it's definitely interesting to see, and it's 100% interesting for me because there are online capabilities for these, and in some of these yeah, low latency is necessary. So it's definitely a part of the industry I'm excited to start helping, and a trend that I've really been seeing kind of start to be pioneered.
The point I mentioned about the countries is because I have this, like, for example, for me, if you go, at least on the mobile space, if you go to South Korea, most of the game are player versus player. So it's something that I know they're super strong on multiplayer, and I find this correlationship with multiplayer games being more trendy on a country with its esports, right? If you think
Mm-hmm.
about
Yes.
esports of League of Legends, the most powerful teams, it's T1, sorry, and it's South Korea, and they have this culture of all these places where you can go and play with your friends and stay there the whole day. So it was more like that. The question: do you think there is a strong correlation, and the more esports evolve, the more multiplayer games will evolve at the same time, or it's just I'm paranoid then?
That's so smart, Isma. I don't think I made that connection yet, but yeah, for sure. Like South Korea is like, especially in League, is like the kings of League.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with Sandy. I also didn't make that connection, but no, you're probably right. Definitely, South Korea is one of them. But now that you mention it, you kind of took South Korea from me, and it would it's the answer that I would have given. But I would say perhaps also in my realm, Brazil is a big one. Not necessarily competitiveness, although there is a big esports presence there, but it's more about community. When I was there for big festival last year in June, which is now Gamescom Latam, and compared to a lot of the bigger conferences that I've attended, they had a dedicated area for Twitch streamers that they had invited. So it has a very small B2B section, but then the exhibition area is really, really big. And a lot of the titles there I saw were multiplayer, but not necessarily competitive, more, again, community driven. And so, really, with that with the whole Twitch streamers. They invited streamers where people can come and say hi to them, take pictures, but then also the exhibition area. A lot of the games, I remember Nintendo had a big booth, and all of the games they had there were, for example, Mario Strikers, which I played with a colleague of mine. I kicked his ass. Sorry, Maurice. Just for the record. But they had Mario Kart and whatnot. So it's really more, I would say, couch co-op, community driven, but multiplayer nonetheless, right? Even though it's not as competitive, it's still about bringing people together and having that multiplayer aspect to it.
If you watched the CS Major, it was a few years ago, and it was in Brazil. The community was just so loud, they actually had to tell them to, like, hey guys, we are trying to, like, put on a show. Could you, like, keep it down just, like, a little bit? And they also ran into a lot of, they were, like, cheating for the Brazil teams. There are ways to kind of do that when you're, like, playing games live. But yeah, I could definitely see Brazil doing that.
Why don't we address the elephant of the room that comes with multiplayer, which is toxicity and all these elements that can make the people to, like, can make even the games. I don't know how accurate might be this assumption, but I saw a report that showed that, I don't remember the percentage, but a lot of players, because of toxicity on the chat and everything, they will leave. Is this something that actually affects the retention? Is this something that the industry is trying to address in that space, or what's your take?
Yes, and I think we might have read the same thing. I think Unity released a multiplayer report. I remember reading most recently the 2022 one. It's possible there's a more recent one out there, but they basically asked players from, I believe, the US, South Korea, and some parts of Europe. So they had this big survey, and a lot of them were, what are the bigger aspects that affects your experience in online multiplayer games? Connection was one of them. But I think up there really was toxicity. And there's lots of different types of toxicity, and also depends on the game, right? So a game like Fall Guys, I remember when it first started, it was free to play, and I'm sorry, it was free for for a bit, and then it became actually free to play when Epic took over. But essentially, the biggest level of toxicity there was griefing, right? When you're trying to kind of like make it to the finish line, and then someone tries to grab you.
And
So
then
that's
grab
kind of
you. Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not as competitive, but it's kind of fun. And with friends, you try to grab each other. You're like, go on without me, I'll grab this guy. So but I mean, to some extent, that is part of toxicity in gaming. When it's often in games, that's nice, and that's I would say the basic level of right. But then you go to, as you mentioned, Ismael, toxicity in terms of communications. So during text chat or voice chat, when it comes to chat, for example, there are great companies out there. There's one called Modulates that they do real time anti-toxicity moderation. And so I think that's fantastic. I know Activision, they're working together with Activision on Warzone, if I'm not mistaken. And Activision later released a report of how many people they have either banned or given warnings to, or timeouts when there was signs of toxicity detected. And it's really cool because it can take things into context, right? Like if you're just cursing at your friends because they did a really bad move, it kind of also takes that into consideration. So, but of course, Activision is especially Warzone. It's specific. Sometimes that's also the fun of the game, right? So I would really say find out what the worst kind of toxicity on your game is, and see what are the efforts to tackle that, or maybe enhance other ways to not make it as bad. So if it's something like communication is absolutely necessary in your game. Like for example, Overcooked online, there's kind of some communication, but
Yeah, you need.
it's really just a
I
wheel where it's
wasn't
like,
expecting
oh,
that as an
washing,
example.
but it's just like, no,
But
I mean, there's
you're,
communication necessary, and
but you're in a
so
kitchen. It's allowed to cars, so it's allowed to course. So it's, you're in a kitchen. It's normal. You
right,
have to yell.
exactly. But to
Right.
keep it player friendly, they have simple chat options, and so it's a really good way to have that communication necessary to the game without allowing toxicity to really take over as much as it could. Of course, you can always spam it. And then I would say at the top level is cheating. which happens, of course, or it's most disruptive in competitive games.
You remember Dana from Game 3?
Yes, we met in
So
San
actually,
Francisco, right?
yeah, she was also a DevGam. I think we met with her as well
Yes,
there.
you're right.
So she had she has this company that has a tool that makes, like, I don't know if it's accurate. She will kill me if I pitch it wrong, but it's it's more like matches based on your activity with other players online, matches you to the right players. So you use that power of all the multiplayer instead for the toxicity or to get scared and stop playing, to use it more to socialize, build a community, build a group of friends inside of the game.
Yeah, when it comes to cheating, I forgot who it was specifically, but I know, for example, some developers or publishers decide to have like people who are caught cheating. They put them in the same lobby, and it kind of turns out for an amusing game, amusing session. And you're cheating. You just I guess you got to make sure you have the best cheats. But also, ironically, in a sense, I think that's a fun idea because you don't really want to alienate completely, because I would say those who do cheat on a game tend to also be a bit more loyal to it. Now, of course, there are several different ways that you can tackle that, and there's even I had a conversation with a good industry friend about this, where it's like, yeah, I mean, how do you tackle? Do you ban cheaters even though they're most likely the ones to perhaps be paying more to your game, right? And so it's like, yeah, but then they're also alienating those who don't cheat, and then they leave the game, and then they are not able to spend money on your game, buy these cosmetics, get the battle pass, and so on and so forth. So it's I mean, it's always an interesting topic, and I'm always learning new things. And yeah, toxicity in general, it's yeah, different ways to go about it, and I'm just really happy to see that in the industry there's people working towards it and people getting creative on how to tackle them in their own games, which is always a fun thing to see.
Yeah, not to bring in the girl card, but there's a few games that I like refuse to play just because of the toxicity when you have to talk in voice chat and they find out you're a girl, and like CS for example, like I can't. No. I refuse, and it looks fun and I watch a lot of pro CS, but you know, we were talking about kind of putting people together, so having a full team of girls, that sounds all great, but then at one point, like, do I not get better because I'm not playing with all these other different types of people? So definitely a catch 22, and I don't really know what the right answer would be in that case, but yeah, I just don't play that game because of it.
In a matchmaking kind of perspective, a developer can put, so you can maybe pick certain options. Casual is always quote unquote a good way to go, but it's not as competitive, and as you say, Sandy, you're probably
I
not
don't know,
getting
sometimes casual
better.
can be a death. Yeah.
Sometimes also, yeah, sometimes casual can also be
Yeah.
crazy, but no, I think yeah, backend is always tricky, but and especially matchmaking. But if there's I think there should be some sort of solutions where you can always pick regions or competitive, or competitive or casual, game modes. Yeah, I think there should also be a different type of matchmaking setting where it's like, okay, no comms, just play, or yeah, something of the sort. I think would be interesting to see developers start implementing in the game as a way to combat um, toxicity, or at least let someone choose. Okay,
Some games have to have comms though, right? Like
yeah.
Overcooked online or CS, or like like Valorant. Like you kind of have to have comms in order to
Hmm.
be competitive against the other team. So
Well,
I
and,
don't. Maybe there would be like a way to like ping without actually having to like communicate. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. And in that case, then they would definitely benefit from Modulate, and I'm kind of like pitching for them right now. But 100%, this is something that they specialize on, and I think it's a great um, thing to it's a great technology and for a really good cause. And seeing it implemented in games like these, because yeah, it sucks to not be able to play a title that you watch other professionals play because of this exact reason. And that's why I think it's very honorable, and why we're actively partnering with them to make the online multiplayer experience as better, as best and enjoyable as possible.
Now, when you are moderating in that sense, do you think that, I mean, it is an AI tool, right? Like it's a robot.
Yes.
Do you think that because of that, there's anything lost with doing all of that? Like, some people really enjoy video games for the toxicity. They like to be able to like get their anger out, and like yell at their
Yeah.
teammates or their team. So obviously it's going to have a positive impact for people like me. But do you think it will have also a negative impact for maybe those lifelong players?
Yes and no. I think this is something I'm sure that these solutions are really taking into consideration, and I know for a fact, as AI improves, or there will be that sort of distinction where, okay, yes, they are releasing their frustration, but nothing too uh, that's maybe toxic, and maybe it's just, oh, all in good fun, let's allow it, or perhaps I know with some anti-cheat solutions, if something does happen, it can be reviewed by someone from the dev team or the publishers, and kind of say, okay, while it's not real time, someone has to look in and say, okay, this is what happened. Do we decide it was intentional, and then make a decision to either, okay, ban them, yes or no, or whatever the punishments the publisher sees fit. But yeah, no, I 100% I understand. Back in my teenage years, in the Modern Warfare 2 lobbies, man,
Yeah.
those were the days.
Amazing,
I'm not saying I partook in any, but it was just so funny playing Search and Destroy, where like you couldn't have party chat. It was just all game chat, and it was part of the fun. But it got very toxic, and
It wa- wasn't the
thankfully, it's
place
not my
for
scene anymore.
wasn't the place
Sorry.
for the weeks. It wasn't the place for the
No,
week.
no, it wasn't the place for the week. Oh
No.
man, but no, but especially like, and I mean, at the stage, at least in my life where I am, I don't have as much time to play and get good and competitive anymore. So I like hopping into multiplayer games and not be berated by someone because I'm not playing as good. Because I just simply don't have the time to keep up with the meta, or the best loadouts or the best characters to use, and so it's yeah, I think it's a topic we're going to be talking about for a long time, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of solutions come out from this, and how, again, how developers and publishers will tackle them
I don't know if there's ever going to be like a perfect answer. So it's probably one of those conversations we'll have until, you know, till it's
forever.
Fallout and the bombs drop or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. Like,
We'll even have these conversations in the vault. Don't worry about
yep.
it.
I've been super into Fallout lore recently.
And what about the part of this cybersecurity and everything with all these multiplayer games and with all this access to talk with other people? Uh, how do you see the trends? What's the biggest problems that you see in the current, like in the current market when it comes to this multiplayer? That it's easy to connect with others, maybe it's easy to get the IP and the IP address, and you know steal money or find, I don't know, a Nigerian prince in the chat that is asking you for hacks. But you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, for that specifically, awareness, I guess, is just the best tool. Um, when it comes to cybersecurity, I mean, the most common thing we see in video games is DDoS attacks. So they're direct denials of service. And so essentially, the way I understand it is, um, a party, or someone with bad intentions just sends a boatload of traffic to the server where the game is being hosted, and so it causes just players to not be able to play. um, but when it comes to things like IP addresses and things like those, they're very hard to get and very, I would say, impenetrable, especially if people are connecting to one single server. Of course, it depends on what which solution this particular game is using. But as far as I've been in the industry, it's not something common I've seen, regardless of hosting solutions, whether it's peer to peer or you're hosting on a server. And when it comes to the Nigerian prince, I'm still waiting to hear back from him. It's been a few days, but no,
Yeah, same.
yeah, human error um, will always be a thing, right? And so from this, it's just awareness. I don't think I've heard even many stories about it happening, for example, online multiplayer games, because I like to think people who play games are uh, tech savvy enough to know kind of like what feels sketchy and what might not. But nonetheless, I think awareness is always the best answer.
I mean, it's always outside of the game itself. Like, for example, you and I don't know each other. We start playing online. We get to be friends. We jump on Discord or another chat platform, and then it comes to like the scam, or all the way around. Like one of our ex-employees, ex-colleagues, Dimas, he actually was. I think he was living in Venezuela, and he moved to Argentina because he sold a lot of items from the game, and also a friend of him was the one who hosted him in Argentina, and was also from, he knew that guy from the game. So it's for the good and for the bad. I guess the whole scam goes more after the, like beyond the game, outside the game. But then in the game, the cybersecurity problem comes to the servers, right? That's why you probably have a lot of maintenance or a team who is always checking your own cybersecurity.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember again playing Modern Warfare 2. A lot of the plays to scare people, right? It's like, oh, I'm gonna get your IP address. I know where you live. I'll find out where you live. I'll come to your house. And it's like, I just don't think that's possible.
I don't think
I've
so.
never heard
Yeah.
anything like that, unless you carelessly divulge information. Yeah, but listen, even me saying this, I remember playing MapleStory when I was much younger, and I fell for a scam. Where it's
Oh, yeah.
like, oh yeah, let me get you some free coins. Come here, and it's like, okay, you have to drop all your good gear, and then you'll get the
Oh,
free money. And then I dropped my good gear, and then someone came from the shadows and picked it all up, and then at least that's all like in game stuff.
if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. That's what I've learned.
Absolutely, absolutely. At the end of the day, MapleStory, I think eventually they did put out kind of like pop-ups and messages saying, be aware. So I think that's really good on their part. So even for things like these, there's definitely things that developers can put on their games to say, watch out for these kinds of scams or something. It's just being on top of it, and especially now with games as a service, titles becoming more popular. I think it's great for developers to have that kind of quote unquote customer service part where if someone does get scammed or something does happen, there's some support for them as well to help tackle this and then raise awareness about the common scams or schemes that are going on. I think would really be great to see moving forward.
Be there for your community. Long
Be
story
there for your
short.
community. Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure. I feel like we had a really fun conversation. But I always like to leave our guest with one final question, and that is, if you could go back in time and give yourself a cheat code to, further your career or get to where you are now faster, what would your cheat code be?
I've listened to quite a few of the podcast episodes, and I was kind of
So you should have been
expecting this
prepared.
question.
Yep.
Yes, I did come to expect this question, and I didn't really prepare for this one. But if I were to give myself a cheat code to perhaps start earlier, which I think I definitely would have liked, is just don't don't give up, or maybe not necessarily. Just realize that there are opportunities for to get your foot in the door in the industry, because once you do, then the opportunities just open up immensely. So really, as I mentioned, I started kind of doing mostly brand focused things, but a little bit in gaming, and then I started learning more the different kinds of service providers in the industry. Uh, then I moved on to that, and now I talk a lot closer with developers and publishers, and even in these companies, developers and publishers, there's business development people, commercial roles, which for someone who isn't like myself isn't skilled in development or coding or animations or anything of the sort, is really it it would have given me hope, right? So if I can go back and say there's more commercial opportunities than you thought, and it's at the end of the day, it's what I'm good at. I'm a people person. I like to talk. I like to tell my stories. I like to listen to people, especially in the industry, because everyone's just so passionate, and I
It's so
absolutely love it.
interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I would
Yeah.
say, don't bring yourself down. There are opportunities. You'll get
Yeah.
there. You'll get there, and yeah, just dive deeper, look into it, and even just one tiny toe in the door will open up opportunities.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Awesome.
I thought the tip you were going to give to yourself was don't trust this guy on Maple Story.
Yeah. That's real life advice too. If someone tells
Man,
you
you're telling me.
they can get you better gear or stuff, and it's too good to be
Don't listen
true,
to them.
Yeah.
it probably is.
Thanks for being here. You were great. Hopefully, I'll see you soon at some event at some point. But yeah, thanks a lot. It was great.
This was really fun, and I'm glad we were able to do this. And we'll definitely be seeing more of each other.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out all of our others. We are available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. My name is Sandy. Bye.